Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devi Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Viranga Vedanta Vijjastana Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Guru Jai Ma Jai Ma. Happy to join once again our discussions on the Sri Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. And we are just started. We're on our, I think, our third class, beginning chapter 2. The Devi has graciously appeared before the Himalaya and the gods, and they've asked their first group of questions. The ultimate question we must remember is that she grant them lifelong, unswerving devotion, right? And then the secondary question was, please explain your nature, right? How to attain union with you or communion with you, and explain the essence of all the Upanishads, all the Vedanta. So she, and as well as Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, like Tantra, different things they're asking. So she's beginning to unpack. And she starts with answering her, she's beginning to answer the essence of Vedanta, the essence of the Upanishads. Okay, somebody just took over my... Somebody just took over my screen. I don't know how that happened. Okay, no, never mind. You see that okay? Okay, good. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit because we're only a few verses in. I think we're on verse 5 and 6 today. So I want to just remind us what she said so far. May all the gods attend to what I have to say. This is the Devi, Sri Devi Uvacha, Devuchu, right? The goddess speaks. The goddess is speaking. May all the gods attend to what I have to say. And by all the gods means you all, also and us, we're also attending. By merely hearing these words of mine, one attains my essential nature. And then this is her great declaration, like a Mahavakya type of declaration, declaring herself to be the essence of Brahman, the nature of Brahman. The Brahman mentioned in the Upanishads. She herself is that. Aham evevasha. I alone existed in the Purvam, in the beginning, when there was nothing else at all, O Mountain King. My true self is known as pure consciousness, the highest intelligence, the one supreme Brahman, as Chit, Sambit, and Para Brahma Eka, the one supreme Brahman. So this is a verse we discussed, one of the first of the two verses we discussed last week. It is it, here the it refers to Brahman, which she has, we have to remember, she has declared herself to be that Brahman, right? So when she says Brahman, when she says it is beyond reason, indescribable, incomparable, incorruptible, that's the same as saying that I am, who's I, the goddess Bhuvaneshwari, supreme goddess Bhuvaneshwari, am beyond reason, indescribable, incomparable, incorruptible. From that, from out of itself, meaning Brahman, or let's be more personal, from out of Bhuvaneshwari Devi, supreme goddess, right? From out of itself, from out of myself, let's say, she says, evolves a certain power, right? Shakti Mayati, who is known, renowned, described as Maya. There's some Shakti, some power that is Maya. Let me get to my verse here. Verse 3, this is verse 3. So the essence of the most important part of this verse is describing her describing Brahman and describing Devi herself as Brahman, for starters, identifying as Brahman, and then also describing that is unknowable, unthinkable, indescribable, right? From that, some power comes known as Maya. Let's look with Maya. So now we spent quite a bit of time on this verse. Now it's describing this certain power. This describing Maya. Maya is neither real nor unreal is this Maya. Nasati sa nasati sa. Neither real nor unreal. Nor is it both, for that could be contradictory, that wouldn't make sense, incongruous, right? Lacking such characteristics, this indefinite entity has always subsisted. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this neither real nor unreal, right? In the previous verse, or in the previous verses, Brahman or the Devi has been described as indescribable, as she has been described. Of course, that's a beautiful contradiction. Described as indescribable, defined as indefinable, right? Right. Maya is also described neither this, neither that, neither existing nor not existing, indefinite, also indescribable. Both Brahman or Maya, both Brahman or Devi and Maya, this particular Shakti of Maya, are described as ineffable, indescribable, right? Right. But here Maya is being described as neither real nor unreal, right? Brahman or Devi is not being described as neither real nor unreal. Devi or Brahman is the real, right? That is the one, the real, Sat, Sambit, Chit, Para Brahma Eka, right? The one supreme Brahman, the eternally existing. So Maya and Brahman, Maya and Devi here are similar. They share certain characteristics of being indescribable, right? But here the description is very different. Brahman is real in a very absolute sense, and Maya is not real, nor is it, you can't just say it's unreal, right? So what is like Sat and Asat, there's different, there's in Vedanta, this is using Vedantic language, of course. In Vedanta, there's Sat and Asat. Here, that's what's being Sat and Asat. Sat means exists, is real, and Asat is unreal. There's another word called Mithya. Mithya means like false, right? And false is different than unreal, right? At least technically. All right, so let's look at unreal first. What's an example of something that's unreal, right? Something that unreal does not exist and cannot exist. It's definition that it cannot exist. For instance, I'll just use one that's mentioned in the classic, in the scriptures and the commentaries, as a son or a daughter of a barren woman, right? So that's something that does not exist. We can say it, but it's something that does not exist, right? Or the other one, the horns of a hare, a bunny rabbit's horns, does not exist, right? So that's something we cannot see it because it does not exist. It's not like it's not that it's temporary. It's not that we're misseeing it. It simply does not exist, right? So Brahman is existence, right? But Maya can't be said to exist in that sense. It exists, like what we mean by Maya. Remember, the whole point of these verses is describing how the Devi Brahman has become, one who existed before anything else existed, has become or manifested, or somehow or another we end up with this world, Jeev Jagat, right, of souls and of the world and living entities, us and the world, right, the variegated world. So that description, some power of Maya creates this world, right? But that Maya does not exist in the sense that Brahman exists, because right, we the son of a barren woman we cannot see because it has no possible existence, whereas the world we see, right? So it exists in a certain sense. It can't be said not to exist because we see it. You can't see something that doesn't exist, right? We may misperceive it. We may label it differently. We may misunderstand it, perhaps, right? But we can't say it doesn't exist because we see it. And so an example of this, also there's some classic examples, is something that we see but doesn't exist, right? So an example of that is a mirage. In a mirage, of course, I've ever been driving across the Mojave Desert, I've seen a few times, where you see from a distance, you see shimmering water, right? And so we see water, but there's no water there. So we see something, or we think we do, or we misunderstand it, but it's not actually there. So that's an example of seeing something that's not actually there. Another example is seeing something, but mis-seeing it. An example of that, the classic example, I'm just using classic, this is Vedantic language. I'm describing some of these examples using the classic Vedantic examples. Excuse me. Of like the classic of seeing a snake in a rope, right? So there's something there, right? It's not that you're not seeing something, you're seeing something, but you're not actually seeing a snake. You're misunderstanding, you're misreading what's there, right? So this is different ways of thinking how something can neither exist because it's not real in the absolute sense, right? And also there's another, these are definitions we have to use, we have to set ourselves up with. Like in Shankaracharya's introduction to the Brahma Sutra, he gives his definition of what is meant by satya, what is meant by real. If I remember properly, I haven't looked in a while, but means that which has always existed, that existed in the past, that exists now, and will always exist. That which always existed, that is called satya, right? So Maya, when she says, in the opening verse, she says, before anything, I was, right? So she's describing herself as Sat in that sense. She existed before anything else. Before the changing world, she existed as the unchanging substratum, right? But what about the changing world? Does it exist? It exists in some sense. It can be seen, we experience in it, but it already has violated the criteria of always existing, right? Because before, if there is a time before it existed, that means it didn't always exist. And everything we see, including ourselves, are changing, temporary, fluctuating. Therefore, nothing we see reaches the criteria of Sat, right? Everything we see, therefore, is it Asat then, that it doesn't exist? It's not Asat either. It's not Sat, because it doesn't match the criteria of always existing. And it's not Asat, because it's not like the son of a barren woman, right? Because we see it. It's that we still perceive it, right? It's also not eternal in another sense. One thing, it's just everything in the world we see always changing, so it's not eternal. But also even the world itself, Maya itself, as we'll discover, we're describing Maya. Advaita Vedanta, classical Advaita Vedanta, says it's temporary in another sense. It seems to have a beginning. I mean, it seems to be beginningless in some sense, exists always within the womb of Brahman, some inherent power of Brahman that's complicated to describe while still obeying the chaste logical laws of Advaita, right? But it seems to come to an end, because if we misunderstand, so the things we see are temporary, therefore they're not Sat in the classic sense. They're not Asat because we see them, but also they're temporary in another sense, that even if they're a misunderstanding or a misreading, an illusion based on ignorance, when ignorance is destroyed or removed, then Maya, or what we experience, also is destroyed, right? The snake that we see in a rope disappears, right? Because as soon as we see the rope, the snake disappears, right? So another term, so I mentioned that the Sat and Asat, these terms, Maya is neither Sat nor Asat. That's the statement, right? So Vedanta will also use this term mitya, M-I-T-H-Y-A, mitya, or mityava, right? And this means false, right? Or indeterminable, right? False is something that appears and is later negated or contradicted, or is corrected. The unreal is never an object of experience, the concept of unreal is the concept of unreal is self-contradictory. So, but we can experience falsely. We can experience real things kind of falsely, right? Or anyways, yeah, complicated, right? So in classical Vedanta, there's Madhusudana Jaima. Oh, thank you. In classical Vedanta, I believe Madhusudana Saraswati, I believe, I'm forgetting. I should have made a more mental note, but I believe he clarifies kind of three qualities of mithya, of this level of unreal, of illusory or false rather than unreal, right? So the first is similar to what Shankara, opposed to the Shankara's definition of real as existing past, present, and future, that which does not exist in the three divisions of time, past, present, future, right? That is mithya, that is false. That which is removable by knowledge, that by as soon as you have knowledge, that disappears by knowledge, that is also mithya. That which is identical with the object of sublation, like the snake is identical to the rope. As soon as you realize the rope, the snake disappears, is sublated into it, right? These are ways of understanding mithya. So in the Advaitic school, you can make general statements of a complicated school, but in general, let's make a general statement of a complicated school full of nuance, right? Right. That this world appearance, which is the topic of discussion here in the Devi Gita, right, is negated by the knowledge of Brahman, and hence it is illusory, not exactly unreal, but not real, not unreal, but false, right? The world and Maya are neither real nor unreal. That's what we're getting to, right? So let me go back to let's look at the verse again. Not to get too far into it here. There's another way of understanding that also plays into it, and it's used in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the same asat asat, sat asat, right? Or nasat nasati sa nasati, right? Both real and unreal, or neither real nor not unreal. That is being used slightly differently in the Bhagavatam, right? There it refers to cause and effect, which is interesting. Sat is the cause, asat is the effect, which is interesting. If you think of like the cause of the snake is the rope, right? So maybe the rope is real, the snake is unreal, right? So the snake is the cause, the rope is a cause, the snake is the effect, right? It's another way. And so, and there's a reason I bring this up, because this is not it's using the language of classical Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, right? In a messy way, because I believe I strongly believe that this is a Shakta text, probably because it's described as a Shakta text. It itself says it's a Shakta text. The sectarian position and philosophical position is Shaktism, right? Sanskritized Shakta text, right? So I believe it's really arguing for a Shakta understanding of this, but it's using the language, the metaphor and language and arguments of more classical Advaita Vedanta, right? So when you say that she is the cause, she is neither Maya is neither the cause. Hey, we'll go back to the cause and effect in a second. And the next verse will show that. Well, let's go back to today's verse. Okay. If anybody can pronounce that word, I'll give you a nickel, right? It's a lot of words put together. Let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 7 words put together due to the Sandhi. And we mentioned in the beginning of this course, or the series, that certain texts are fairly simple in Sanskrit. Like Bhagavad Gita is fairly simple. Even Srimad Bhagavatam, which I'm more familiar with, is fairly simple. The Devi Bhagavatam is not simple. And partially perhaps is because the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam they're so often quoted and so often translated and so often commented on that the word structures of the sentences of the verses is fairly well established, right? That every Bhagavatam does not have the same level of commentary and discussion on the words. But so let's see. Let me see if I can pull it apart. Pāvakasya. Pāvakasyo is pāvakasya. Uṣṇita attaha eva iyam. Uṣṇāṃśoriva eva dīdhitiḥ. Dīdhitiḥ. Okay. Pāvakasya means of fire, right? So we'll look. You can see this translation. I'll read the translation of the verse, and then we'll pull it apart. As heat inheres in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as cool light in the moon. So just so this Maya inheres firmly in me. So pāvakasya. This pāvaka means fire. Pāvakasya means of fire, belonging to fire, right? Uṣṇita. Uṣṇita means heat. So artaha. So eva iyam. Just in the same way. So this is good. This is the example. Just as heat exists within fire, right? As heat inheres and exists within, permeates within fire, right? And then it says, so it's giving three classic examples. Uṣṇāṃśoriva means of the sun. Eva dīdhitiḥ, right? Just, and the splendor, the dīdhitiḥ is splendor, rays coming from the sun. As so, I would say it says brilliance in the sun, as brilliance belongs to the sun, as heat inheres or belongs to fire, as brilliance of the sun. Another word for brilliance, it means brilliant, but means sun rays. As sunshine, let's say sunshine. As sunshine, that's a good word. As sunshine exists within, or is within the sun. Candrika, moonlight. Eva candrasya, candrikam. Did I miss candrikeveyaṃ? Ooh, I think I misspelled something. Hold on here. There's a missing word here. Sorry. Before this candrikeveyaṃ, it should say candrasya. Actually, maybe I'm gonna add it. So we have it, candrasya. Did that work? Candrasya. This one I can actually, it's a workable live document. This is unexpected. I didn't know that I could do that. Candrasya means of the moon, right? Candrika, moonlight. Eva evyam, just like that, right? Like what? Like this. The this here refers to Maya, right? Remember the topic in the last verse, last two verses, the topic was Brahman. Now Maya has introduced. Now this is describing Maya, right? So as heat inheres in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as moonlight in the moon. Mameyaṃ sahajā dhruvā. Mameyaṃ. Mameyaṃ. Mam, me, right? This is, so who's speaking? This is Bhuvaneshwari, who is non-different from Brahman. The Brahman of the Upanishad, Bhuvaneshwari of the Tantras, right? Of the text, right? Maya inheres in the same way in me. And it says actually sahajā. Sahajā means is natural to me, is innate in me. Sahajā means spontaneous, natural, innate, right? So just like you could imagine, you have to imagine your experience. Fire is not, heat is natural to fire, is innate in fire, right? Sunlight, the brilliance, the sun and heat of the sun is innate, is natural to the sun. And moonlight is natural to the moon, innate in the moon, inheres in the moon, right? And the dhruvā means firmly, right? So I think he inheres firmly in me, right? It's it's naturally, it's firmly in me. So he's chosen to use this term, pāvakasyoṣṇyateveyamuṣṇāṃśoriva and candrasya as of fire. She says, so as heat and fire, but actually fire, heat belongs to fire, right? Of means to, the asya it's, I want to say belongative. That's not the right. That's a great. I just made up a new linguistic category. Belongative form, right? Right. Possessive, I guess, is I guess perhaps the word I'm looking for. Right. It means so as heat natural, and so let's use this sahajā and dhruvā. This naturally belongs. This naturally exists within, firmly in. Just like Maya naturally exists in me, in the same way, fire naturally exists, or fire it's like heat belongs to fire, right? Sunlight belongs to the sun. Moonlight belongs to the moon, right? So similarly, to use that translation, to use this choice, right? Maya belongs to me, right? So we can choose slight other examples that are used in classical Vedanta. The examples that are used is like waves in the ocean, right? So you can say like waves in the ocean. That's a beautiful. Sri Ramakrishna liked to use this one also. So Vivekananda used this, the waves in the ocean example, right? So a wave in the ocean, right, is waves are natural to the ocean. They're spontaneous. They're you can't think of an ocean exactly without waves. They're intrinsic to the oceanness, right? But the ocean does not belong to the waves. The wave belongs to the ocean, right? So similarly, heat does not, the sun does not belong to sunlight. Sunlight belongs to heat. Moonlight does not belong to the moon. I mean, moon does not belong to moonlight. Moonlight belongs to the moon. Heat belongs to fire. Fire does not belong to heat, right? So there is this sat asat, meaning that way of cause and effect, right? Cause, not just like an efficient cause like that, but the material. You can't have waves without water. We can't have waves without the ocean. You can't have ocean waves without the ocean, specifically. So what does that mean? If my Maya is this world, like we experience, of Jeev Jagat, of us and the world, right? So to say that it's unreal, we can't say that. You can't say it's real. You can't say it's unreal. Can we say it's false? Okay, let's say mithya. Let's say it's false, right? But which way is it false? Is it false like the snake in a rope, misseen in the rope, or is it false that way? Where so let's use this example that the Devi is giving, the three examples that the Devi is giving. It's not that we have the snake. We see a snake when there's really a rope, and once we see the rope, the snake disappears, and we realize there was never a snake there. Can we say that about heat and sun, heat and fire, sunlight and sun, moonlight and moon, right? We may see the sunlight, right? But we say once we see the sun, the sunlight disappears. In one sense, it does. If you're conscious of the sun, maybe you're not conscious of individual rays of the sun. If you're conscious of the ocean, maybe if you think of the ocean, you don't really think of waves in the ocean, but the waves don't disappear. They're not a misreading of the ocean, right? They're just a secondary manifestation. They're not, they exist as part of the ocean. You can't separate it. Sunlight exists as part of the sun. You can't separate it, right? Between the sun and sunlight, which one's sat? The sun is sat. That is the eternal reality. Sunlight's changing. It's dependent. Okay? So, so you of the sun of Brahman, of the sun of fire, of the moon in this example, which is pointing to Brahman and Devi, she's real, she's sat, but the dependent qualities of in this example, sunlight, moonlight, and heat, or in tantric cosmology of name, form,
Jeev Jagat, of the world of multiplicity, right? The world of multiplicity, it doesn't not exist, right? It's just and it doesn't disappear in the same. It doesn't necessarily disappear upon realization, right? It's dependent, right? And therefore it is anyway, it belongs to. Let's look at the I want to read actually. This is from the commentary from C. Mackenzie Brown. There's in the comment. I very rarely read the commentary out loud, but I'll read this this one paragraph. It's good to remind us of what's happening here, right? For Shaktas, and we would argue, the Devi herself argues that this is a Shakta text, the Devi Bhagavatam, or Devi Bhagavatam, Devi Gita, for Shaktas, with their affirming cosmological orientation. That's a good description of Shaktism. Shaktism has an affirming cosmological orientation, which means the cosmos is seen as real in some sense, not in the absolute sense because it's changing. It's not sat in the absolute sense because it's changing, right? And it's also dependent, like heat to fire is dependent on fire, like waves are dependent on the ocean, like moonlight's dependent on the moon, as sun rays are dependent on the sun, right? But it's still it's in a certain sense it's real, right? It's seen positively, right? Affirming. So for Shaktas, was their affirming cosmological orientation. Maya is basically a positive, creative, magical energy of the goddess that brings forth the universe. Let's before we do the rather than, right? We're comparing it. For Shaktas and their affirming cosmological orientation, Maya is basically a positive, creative, magical energy of the goddess that brings forth the universe. So I think this example is ascribing just that. Let's look at the verse one more time here. Right? As Hedon, so there's by the power of Maya, let's look at the previous verse, right? From out of itself evolves a certain power renowned as Maya, right? As Hedon here in the fire. So this is the example. By some power of Maya, Brahman, or here identified as Devi by one of her Shaktis, or Brahman by one of its Shaktis. We can use either form of this gendered language, whether we're looking from the goddess perspective or from the transgendered, beyond gender idea of Brahman as an it or that, right? By its power, it has an intrinsic power, or she has an intrinsic power. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's his intrinsic power, right? One of his Shakti of Maya is one of his powers, one of her powers, one of its powers, right? To create I would say an existing world, a real world, but not real in the Sat standard. It cannot meet the definition of, if by Sat you mean eternally existing, past, present, and future, unchanging like that. It's not that, except for maybe the world as a infinitely complex changing reality, maybe always existing. And we get into like process theology and the like. We can jump into that at a future date perhaps, but I don't think that's implied here. So, but it really exists. It's not like we're so let's compare it. So to finish this quote, for Shaktas was their affirming cosmological orientation. Maya is basically a positive, creative, magical energy of the goddess that bring forth the universe, rather than a deceiving power that ensnares individuals in a false realm of the world and hinders their enlightenment. A common Advaitic interpretation of Maya. So Advaita Vedanta generally can't be too heavy-handed because there's varieties and nuance in all philosophies, right? But if you're making a general statement, this is a nice general statement that can be made, right? So Advaita would hold that Maya is a deceiving power, right? So there's an intrinsic power within Brahman that deceives us, that makes the something that doesn't exist, lets us see something that's not, it lets us see something that's not there, right? By the power of Maya, right? We see wrongly this, we see a snake where there's only a rope, or to use the main point, we see a world where there's only Brahman, right? So in one sense, the world is dependent on Brahman, like sunlight on the sun, right? But not exactly, right? It's like, because the sunlight does not disappear when one sees the sun, right? They're natural to each other. You can't separate them, right? So the world doesn't disappear from the Shakta perspective when one sees Brahman, right? So Sri Ramakrishna used this language. He says in the beginning, he's describing a Vedantic process, but in general, in the beginning, one thinks the world, the world is false and Brahman is real. God is real and the world is unreal, right? So that's a legitimate sadhana. And one of the purposes of it, by real, if you mean temporary, to find out what is permanent, what is temporary, what is permanent. It's important discrimination, discernment between the permanent and the impermanent, the temporary and the eternal, right? The infinite and the finite, right? So though that's an important type of sadhana, what to focus on if you're trying to find the infinite, the eternal, the permanent, right? The subtle, right? But this idea that, oh, so this world is simply unreal and Brahman alone is real. But then Sri Ramakrishna said, upon the realization of Brahman, when one has that experience of the one, when one sees the sun, or one sees fire, or one sees the moon, or one sees the ocean, to use these examples, right? Right. Then one comes back down from that peak type of experience, like ecstatic, unitive, peak type of experience, unitive experience, or a monistic type of experience, right? Which in yoga we call it nirvikalpa samadhi, that type of experience of one way beyond mental modifications like that, perhaps, right? One then realizes, oh, the one has become everything, right? The world, the Brahman has become the world, or Ma has become, God has become everything. And he specifically says the 26 cosmic principles, right? That these are the principles of Sankhya, the categories of material manifestation as per Sankhya.
Well, Guruji?
Yes.
Michael asked, and maybe, I don't know if you'll be coming to this, or is it true that Devi never exists without Maya, or Maya never exists without Devi?
So
and then Reverend Zoe just add, Devi and Maya are one.
So yeah, so this is a very important point. So in classic Advaita, if you can make a general statement, in some forms of some presentations of classic Advaita, Maya, by Devi we mean Maya, right? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, I believe that by Devi we don't only mean Maya, or by Maya we don't only mean that Devi exists eternally, Maya exists temporarily, right? The Maya is a Shakti, right, of the Devi, or a Shakti of Brahman, right? So in Shaktism specifically, Devi and Brahman are identified, not just Maya. In some form of Advaita, Brahman is one thing and everything else is Maya, or everything else is Shakti, right? We're in this text, and Sri Ramakrishna also will make that, we'll read, maybe we'll get to be able to read an example of this, where he equates Brahman and Kali, Brahman and Shakti as one thing, right? But within that one being, which M in his subtitles of the section describes as Kali Brahman, one word, I believe it's even one word, no dash or anything, just one, Kali Brahman. That's the deity being worshipped is called Kali Brahman, or we may say here Bhuvaneshwari Brahman, right? Devi Brahman, right? You know, that Devi Brahman has within herself, within itself / herself, a Shakti that's called Maya, right? So when the world is like Sri Ramakrishna in one place, he says, when the world ceases to be, right? Here it says, before the world came, by the power, intrinsic power of Maya, I existed alone. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, after everything is mopped up, after the Mahapralaya, she will exist, right? One with Brahman, as Brahman, right? So that's an important point, that Kali, Devi and Brahman, the Divine Mother and Brahman, are identical. Maya, so Maya is identical with Kali Brahman in the sense that sunlight is identical to the sun, or waves are identical, because in one sense, sunlight is nothing but the sun. Moonlight is nothing but the moon. Waves are nothing but the ocean, right? But still you can describe ocean and waves.
Yeah.
Right. You can describe sun and yes, go ahead.
Yeah. The relationship of, you say like, fire to heat, it's kind of similar to the relationship of the ocean to waves, but there's a difference, because you can imagine a calm ocean, but you can never have cold fire. So which is it like in this case?
Yeah. So any of these, each example will have a limit. Like Ramakrishna, you can't imagine a snake without its wiggling motion, but we can imagine a snake not wiggling.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just that but a snake can eventually wiggle, even if it's not wiggling. Right. So the ocean can have waves on it, even if at present it may not have waves. Right. So but also that shows you that we can. So these are, I think, the limits to the category of the example that's being given. Right. The main point is, I think, is that the waves are nothing but water. Ocean is nothing but waves are nothing but ocean. There's many examples in my head. And zoomed up on coffee right now. Sorry. Heat is nothing but fire in this example. Right. Not actually heat. You can define heat as something separate from fire. Right. Right. And then, but you know what I mean. This is not a scientific example. This is a experiential example. Or moonlight is nothing but the moon, right? But the moon exists in the two. What the moon is a symbol, at least, of the permanent and the original and the source of the power. And moonlight is, as the power of the manifested power, is seen as dependent, as temporary, as secondary. But in one sense, but still we can say like that, but they're not different, right? And so, of course, I'm arguing, this is my temperament and philosophical stance, right, towards a Ramakrishna version of Shaktism, right, that they're, in one sense, they're not separate, right? But we can still, even Sri Ramakrishna, we can think of them as separate, right? And we can think, oh, when we mean this, we mean Brahman or Devi. And when we mean this, we mean Maya, or we mean Jeev and Jagat, right? So let's go, let me let's see here. We'll go back to the point. I'll have a final reading from Ramakrishna. I think we'll pull these things together, and we can bring some more out if there's need be, right? So in that quote that I from C. Mackenzie Brown about the affirming cosmological orientation compared to a view of Maya as some power, that a positive power that creates the world, but that is, when it creates the world, what do we have? We have that it from what? From who? From it has to be from itself. It's an intrinsic power, right? Just like heat is a part of fire, right? As moonlight is part of the moon, at least experientially, right? Poetically, if not chemically and like that, right? So, but the Devi will keep using in this section this type of arguments that classical Advaita uses, right? And I think this is, and I think I believe Professor Mackenzie Brown also makes this point, if I remember, that the Devi Bhagavatam, the Devi Gita specifically is inclusive. It frequently conjoins or mixes Shakta and Advaita points of view, right? And so by Shakta and Advaita, we can, and we had one Swami here many years ago. He and this is some monks of the Ramakrishna order like to use this term. He was using that term. He called it Shakti Advaita, right? So it's a different type of. There's, of course, within Tantra there's non-dualistic strands of Tantra and Kashmir Shaivism, the like, right? But and this is perhaps that also can be described using that language, but it's using the language of Vedanta. So he says this is a Shakti Advaita Vedanta. That's not a category, right? In classical chronology or description of text and schools of thought. But I thought that was an interesting, because this the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and Devi Gita specifically really constantly mixes. It'll use Advaitic language without really letting go of its Shakta perspective, right? That this world is a real manifestation, in some sense real, not eternal, but a manifestation of Brahman, but not just a Brahman, that Brahman that is Bhuvaneshwari. That Brahman, we would say that Brahman that is Kali. Let's go back to the verse here. Okay. So this is fire comes out, and also these examples are great because it shows how heat comes out of fire, and moonlight comes out of the moon, flows from the moon, right? And sunlight, the sun rays shine from the sun, right? So in that sense, so it's describing that by Maya, this whole world of Jiv Jagat, of Nama Rupa, name, form, causation, this whole world, variegated world of experience, right, comes out of Devi, who is Brahman, right, comes out of her, exists in her. Before only she existing, by her power, she brings out a world, right? What happens out of this general Shakti of Maya comes all the distinctiveness of this world. At the end of which, it all comes back. Let's describe how that happens, how she describes it, how that happens. Tasyāṃ, this is much easier to dissect this verse, and the last one is because there's a few breaks. Tasyāṃ karmāṇi jīvānāṃ jīvāḥ kālaśca sañcare abhedena vilīnāḥ suṣuptau vyavahāravat. Something like that. At least I can read it. Now the text is big. Also, I got new glasses. This is my big struggle, trying to see through my glass last year, so I can at least still can't pronounce it, but at least I can see it now. So that's a good thing. So we'll read the translation first. Into that Maya, the actions of souls, the souls themselves, and the ages eventually dissolve without distinctions, as worldly concerns disappear into deep sleep. Right. Tasyāṃ karmāṇi, tasyāṃ, in her. So this is a feminine term, in her, and who is this referring to? The her is Maya, right? So now you have the Devi, who is Brahman, as well as who's become, so by intrinsic power of Maya, one power called Maya that projects and brings out a world, right, is also her, right? With is in a certain sense non-different from her. Looking at the previous verse, in the same sense that heat is not different from fire, like that, right? Tasyāṃ karmāṇi, right? All actions, right? In actions, everything is describing how everything goes back to her, into Maya, right? Tasyāṃ karmāṇi jīvānāṃ. So karmāṇi, actions, right? The actions, jīvānāṃ, of souls. That's us. The actions of individuals will go to her, merge into her, right? And jīvāḥ, as well as souls. Not only our action, means our karmas, will go into her, but we will also go back into Maya. We come out of Maya, we will also go back into Maya, right? And kalaha, time itself, right? And he describes it as the ages. Kala means ages. Some translators have said, like at the time of Mahapralaya, the whole cycles of time, the whole existence of time itself gets mopped up and brought, well, that will merge back into her. So tasyāṃ karmāṇi jīvānāṃ jīva kalaha sañcare, right? Into Maya, into her, the actions of souls, the souls themselves, and the ages eventually. Abhedena vilīnāḥ. Vilīnāḥ means dissolve, merge, disappear, melt, right? Abhedena. Abhedena means without distinctions, indistinct, right? Actually, abhedena means actually as without distinctions, but by indistinction. Actually, I believe Swami Bhajanananda helped me work. We were looking at this word by non-difference. So this is an interesting thing. Not only we can think, oh, we can imagine, maybe you can imagine, sometimes we think like this, oh, at the end of time, everything will merge back into Prakriti, and Prakriti will merge back into Brahman. We can imagine like this, right? But it merges back because it is not different. Water merges into, a drop of water will merge into water because it's non-different from water. Heat can merge back into fire because it's non-different from fire. There's never a difference, right? There's some power that seems to bring out difference, right? That's the mysterious thing about it, right? By indistinction, by non-difference, everything melts or dissolves into her, into Maya, right? And of course, here, I have 4 translations of this text, and it says tasyāṃ in her means Maya. Everything merges because the topic is Maya, right? But I think it's a little, I think it's maybe purposely a little bit indistinct. Could it be that everything that was projected by Maya merges back into Brahman, back into Devi, right? Does it merge? Usually we think it merges back into Mula Prakriti, right? Into that aspect, and then Mula Prakriti merges back into Brahman, or maybe this is referring the process of merging back into her. I think the primary meaning that merges back into Maya, because in a few verses later on in this chapter, we'll be describing how a new creation cycle starts, right? Because there's jivas and the actions, the karmas of jivas that need to fructify, and they exist in mother's womb as Prakriti, and that will agitate Prakriti and bring out a new creation. It's a very interesting conception, which we'll get to in a few weeks, most likely, right? Right, abhedena, right? By the nature of being indistinct, of being non-different, right? Everything merges or dissolves into her. Just like, and then this is a beautiful, simple example, so you can understand how it happens, right? Vyavahāravat means world, like your anxieties, your world, like your just regular thinking about life and your anxieties about work and family and health, the things you think about, right? Your worldly thought, he translated worldly concern, right? Right. When you go to sleep, sometimes those enter your dream, right? So you take your worldly concerns into your dreams and work them out there, right? But in deep sleep, suṣuptau, in deep sleep, right, there's no remembrance, as classic Advaita psychology holds, right? There's no thought, there's no experience of anything. All of our thoughts, everything we think about, every thought about the day, everything that we bring into our subconscious anxieties and experiences that we bring into our dream world, everything, our waking world, our waking experiences and thoughts, our dream thoughts, all disappear. Where do they go? They get merged in deep sleep, in deep sleep state. So just like that, right? Just like all of our thoughts just disappear in deep sleep, they disappear, right? All of our actions are us as individuals, and the ages themselves disappear, merge into Maya, right? Into that aspect of Devi. So as I'm speaking out loud, one important point has come into my mind. What happens in deep sleep? It all gets merged in the darkness of ignorance, of non-knowing, right? Right. Classical Advaita is actually we merge into Brahman in deep sleep, but that's we're not going. This is a slightly different topic. We've talked about that in the past, the 4 states and the like, Turiya state. But we come out of deep sleep, right? Throughout the night, we go through deep sleep and then dream, and then deep sleep and dream, and deep sleep and then dream, and then we wake up again, and maybe we fall asleep again, maybe dream a little bit and wake up again. What happens to our worldly thoughts? when we go in deep sleep, they disappear, merge into the deep sleep state. What happens when we go into dream? They come back and they fill our dream life. What happens when we wake up? There they are, all fresh again, right? We have maybe a little bit of rest to see them fresh and may hopefully have a little bit of strength and clarity and purification so we could deal with them in a fresh way, right? So similarly, I believe this is because remembering what's coming up. And she describes how the one becomes many. Part of the way the one becomes many is because at the end of time, this kālaśca, right? At the end of time itself, everything gets merged into Maya. Time itself will come back out. After the Mahapralaya, again, the ages come, times again jivas come out, we come back out, our actions come out. They're all latent in Maya, right? So this may be, I believe this is hinting at or foreshadowing an understanding of how the next cycle of manifestation happens. Earlier today, during my afternoon tea, I was remembering verses and that have similar flavors that could be seen to illustrate or shed a little light on the point being made here. And there's one verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 28, right? O skayana bharata avyakta dini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avta nirdhana nanyeva tatra ka hari devana. O skayana bharata, O Bharata, Arjuna, all created beings are unmanifested before birth, manifested in life, and I guess unmanifested on death. This is being described, telling Arjuna he shouldn't lament, right? Therefore, why grieve? Is then he then tells him, right? These are part of the arguments used that you shouldn't grieve about those who are going to die or have died in this battle or die in this battle, right? But the argument being used is that all of us were unmanifested, are now manifest and become unmanifested again. So if we become unmanifested again, why shouldn't we grieve? We're gone. No, because they'll again become manifested, right? So karma, jivas, and time itself is manifested, become unmanifested, merge back into mula prakriti or Maya, and again by divine power, she will send it back out, unfold it once again. Not only in our little cycle of human life, right, but even the larger cycle of creation cycles themselves. So let's go to. I'm going to. I know what I'll do.
Oh,
yes, Swamiji? Yeah.
Michael again had a question. He said, it looks like the souls that merge into Maya are jiva, not atman. So is that?
Yeah. So that's the question, because the souls. It's interesting. The jiva, because here jivas merge into Maya, right? But you've asked. This is the theme, and you've written me a very nice email, which I haven't got a chance to get back to you on, and I haven't forgotten you on some of these points, because it gets a little bit confusing, that because just like this is going back and forth. One second, I've lost my ability to. Can you still see me?
Yes.
Can you see, what are you seeing on the screen? Because I've kind of lost control here.
It's the kind of the checkerboard view.
Okay. Okay, I think I hit the wrong. Okay, hold on here. I've lost. Oops. I have to open up. Hold on, I've lost my graphic. I got ahead of myself here. Open attachment. I know what I did wrong. Okay. Okay, we're back. You can see that, I think. Okay, good. Yeah, so just like it's moving back and forth between the language of Advaita and Shaktism, it's also moving back and forth between the language of who the jiva is, whether the jiva actually exists, right, as an individual, whether our individuality exists, or whether or whether individuality, the individual experience, just like is whether the individual exists eternally or not, or whether or not the individual disappears and only the one remains, like sunlight disappears but the sun remains. We'll describe that in the next few verses. It will hopefully unpack that a little bit more. It talks a little bit about how jivas relate to this. But I wanted to, let's see, we got into Maya there. So let's look at these two verses, for the two verses we talked today, because I'm going to read something from Sri Ramakrishna that I think will use not identical, but almost very similar language to make not an identical, but very similar points, right? As heat inheres in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as cool light in the moon, just so this Maya inheres firmly in me, naturally in me. Into that Maya, the actions of souls, the souls themselves, and the ages eventually dissolve without distinction, as worldly concerns disappear in deep sleep. So you can see that, I hope. Swamiji, is your text on the screen? Because I kind of lost.
Yes, I see it.
Okay. So this is a section translated by Swami Bhajanananda from the Ramakrishna Katamrita. Let's see here. In chapter text 1. Did I write down? I don't think I wrote down the exact. Do you know where this is from? You remember the exact?
This is in the first book, or volume 1. This is the second chapter and the 4th section, and the first subsection of the 4th section.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful scene. I believe so much of Sri Ramakrishna's tantric ontology is described in this conversation. This is he's having on the boat ride with Keshav Sen. Vijay Krishna Goswami is also present. It's a public forum. It's a boat full, a steamboat, a leisurely pleasure trip down the Ganga, full of Keshav Sen's disciples. And Keshav Sen, one of the leaders of the Brahma Samaj at the time, and a friend of Sri Ramakrishna had picked them up and was asking all kinds of important questions, right? And it's so interesting because Sri Ramakrishna is describing these actually pretty profound points, essential points of his tantric theology and ontology, right? But he's not talking to a group of his intimate disciples at Dakshineshwar, right? He's talking publicly to Brahma Samaj devotees who actually don't believe this stuff, right? So I think he's trying to stretch. I think part of this conversation, he's trying to stretch. He even actually says he's praying to Divine Mother when he gets on the boat. Mother, why have you brought me here? Right? What was the Swamiji? They say, like, how can I save them from within their walls? Or
yes,
right? They're all within their walls. How can I free them? Right? In other words, they're all. Brahma Samaj, like many groups, including many of us, have all kinds of preconceived ideas, right? And to be liberated from them is not easy. He says, "Have you brought me? How can I help them? How can I save them? They're stuck." Right? So, but this is his attempt, right? So this chapter is called The Harmony of Vedas and Tantra, right? Adya Shakti Splendor, right? The Adya Shakti, the primordial original goddesses splendor, right? And the harmony of Vedas and Tantras here really, I think, refers to the harmony of Vedanta and Tantra. My Vedas here probably means, because the arguments are a little bit on the Vedantic side, not just clearly Vedic side, right? And I'll read, it's not included here, but I'll read the opening kind of meditation verse, right? What is it called? Anyways, he begins the section with a a verse for contemplation, right? From the Mahanirvana Tantra, it says, you are the subtle and you are the gross, right? You, O mother, are manifest as well as unmanifest. You are both with form and formless. Who is able to know you, right? Subtle and gross, manifest and unmanifest, right? With form and without form. In classic Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, those two categories could be described as sat asat, right? So it's interesting to remember you are both of these things, right? So the book right continues, and in the there's a talk where it continues conversation. So this is what he said: Sri Ramakrishna. Those who are seeking of knowledge, those who are seeking knowledge of Brahman and follow the doctrine of Vedanta, say that creation, preservation, and dissolution, the world and its living beings are all this is Shakti's game. So this is a way of saying that Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta says that creation, preservation, and destruction, as well as all living beings, the jivas themselves, right? They're all, in a certain sense, in Maya or part of Maya, manifested in Maya. Here, Shakti's game, right? If you go on reasoning like this, all this is like a dream, right? Nothing is ultimately real, right? And then he says, Brahman alone is reality, We've heard this argument before, right? Everything else is unreal. Sat asat, or sat and mitya, right? Even Shakti is like a dream, unreal. So the Vedantists would hold, he's establishing the position or describing or summarizing a position of Advaita Vedanta, right? This whole world of experience, creation, preserving, as well as living beings. In one sense, they're just in Shakti's, in Maya's. This is a game of trick, an expression of Maya, right? Brahman is reality. Everything else is unreal. Even Shakti is like a dream. In other words, Maya. This is describing Maya as also ultimately, in some sense, unreal, right? One way to understand this verse, right? Then he says, but reason 1,000 times. If you don't become established in samadhi, in this peak experience of this unitive experience, going beyond Shakti's realm is impossible, right? And when you're in that complete Advaitic experience, Nirgun Brahman, then you're still in the realm of Shakti. You're still in the realm of manifestation and distinction, right? Right. He even says, I am meditating. I am contemplating. Even these ideas are within Shakti's realms. But how beautiful it is, within Shakti's splendor. So he shows you he has a beautiful language. Shakti's realm is Shakti's splendor, right? This expression of this world, right? So then he establishes his position. And so Brahman and Shakti are non-different. As soon as you accept one, you have to accept the other. It is like fire and its power to burn. We've heard a very similar example just now by Devi. As soon as you accept that there's fire, you have to accept its power to burn. Fire cannot be thought of without its power to burn. And then that power to burn can't be thought of without including fire. The sun's rays cannot be thought about without including the sun. Leave out the sun's rays and the sun can't be thought of. Again, an example direct, almost taken word by word from our text, right? Like you can't think of fire without heat, and fire's heat and burning power without fire. You can't think of the sun without sun's rays. You can't think of sun rays without the sun, right? But you can think sun rays come from the sun. Heat comes from fire. You can still say that, but you can't fully make them completely separate. You can't ignore one completely, although you can think of them as separately. So let's see. Anyway, let's see what he says. Then he used another one we didn't use. What is milk like? Oh, it's white. Leave out milk, and milk's whiteness can't be thought of. And then leave out milk's whiteness, and milk can't be thought of, right? So using these examples, so leave out Brahman, and Shakti can't be thought of. Leave out Shakti, and Brahman can't be thought of, right? So here Shakti and Brahman, here Shakti is I think it's both the supreme Shakti as Kali, but also here Shakti as Maya. Its power as Maya also. You can't think of it as separate, right? Leave out the eternal. Now he's using some Vaishnava terms, right? Leave out the eternal, the nitya, and the play, the lila, can't be thought of. So now it's like the eternal, unchanging reality, sat. Leave out sat, and of course you can't think of this, the playful expression of the world, right? Leave out to go to an example we've been using. Leave out the ocean, you can't think of waves, right? So you leave out the eternal ocean, you can't think of the playful manifesting waves, right? Leave out the nila, you leave out the eternal, nitya. The eternal nitya and the play lila can't be thought of. Leave out the lila and the nitya can't be thought of. Of course, we can think of the ocean without waves. We can think of fire without heat, right? But not really. And if we do so, we're making an artificial distinction. I think it's important. Sri Ramakrishna uses another example of measuring, weighing, bell fruit, right? A bell fruit, I think. So bell fruit, this is the bibla fruit, the sacred leaf of Shiva. I have a bell tree fruit. I should have brought it we have a dried bell fruit to offer to the fire tomorrow, right? The very sacred plant thing of Shiva. So, and it's very tasty. And so it has this huge, hard shell. And inside you break it open, it's also full of seeds. You take out the seeds, those aren't edible, are not tasty. And the outer shell is not edible. The flesh is very tasty. You can scoop it out. They make sorbets out of it. It's a very nice drink you can make out of it, right? So when you go to the store, when you go to a grocery, to a vegetable, a fruit market, and you buy, what you're buying is the flesh. You go to the store and pick up a bell fruit, means go up, because we're gonna open it up, crack it open, remove the seeds, scoop out the flesh. We want the flesh, right? And you need to buy as many bell fruits as the amount of them, the amount. You'll need to buy as many bell fruits as we need to match the amount of flesh we need, right? The flesh is the important part. But there's no flesh in a bell fruit without the skin or without the seeds. So you can measure just the flesh. You're leaving out a lot of it. You're leaving out, and you don't get a bell fruit without the whole thing. So you can't think of just one, but you want, as Sri Ramakrishna says, you don't get, I may be not perfectly describing we're not reading that section, this example, but you won't get you're not getting the full picture. You can think of just one, but you're not getting the full picture. The full bell fruit. Just like you can't think of the lila without the nitya. You can, but maybe you shouldn't. If you do, you're leaving a big part out. If you think of one without the other, you're leaving a big part out. Although we can kind of think about it, maybe, right? So leave out Brahman and Shakti can't be thought of. Leave out Shakti and Brahman can't be thought of. Leave out the eternal, Nitya, and the play, Lila can't be thought of. Leave out the Lila and the Nitya can't be thought of. The primal power, Aja Shakti. Here, Aja Shakti, the primal power, is, in one sense, in Thakur's definition, Brahman, right? Is playful, Lila Moyi, right? The beautiful name. It's a description and a name for the Devi. It is playful. And what's her play? What is that? She who is Nitya is also Lila, playful, Lila Moy. She brings about creation, preservation, and destruction and dissolution, right? The same thing that the Vedantists dismiss as unreal, right? She brings out creation, preservation, destruction. Her name, kettle drum, is Kali, right? So when Sri Ramakrishna means Kali, this is who he talks about. I would argue that her name in our text is Bhuvaneshwari, right? A very similar argument, parallel arguments are being made, right? With the supreme deity who is non-different from Brahman. The primal power is playful. She's bringing out creation, preservation, dissolution. Her name is Kali. Kali is Brahman. Brahman is Kali. They're the same thing. right? That's a very big statement. We have to let that, of course, maybe we don't have to let that sink in. Maybe that's what we believe, or first time we're hearing it, or that we think, oh, that's cool. That's what I've always thought, right? But actually, this is a controversial statement, right? That Kali and Brahman are the same thing. They're the same thing. When she's inactive, not doing any work, no creation, preservation, or dissolution, when we think of this idea, then we call her Brahman, right? It's not that she is Brahman, that she is inactive and not doing any work, no creation, preservation, destruction. But when we think of it, this is a limitation of human thought. When we think of that, then we call that thought, the Ajja Shakti, that is Brahman, not doing anything, right? Water not in waves, ocean not in waves, sun not shining. See, you see, to say sun not shining, can we really say that? Right? We could really say heat, fire not hot, right? You know, in one sense, you can't really hold that. But if you think of that, then we call that Brahman. When she's doing all this work, we call her Kali. We call her Shakti. The same person. The name and form are different. This is, I think, a brilliant and concise description of Sri Ramakrishna's tantric, on what I call Sri Ramakrishna's tantric ontology. We've described this in many, many ways. He's described it as a dynamic absolute, right? We've described it in so many different ways, right? It's also the foundation of his radical religious pluralism, right? So Brahman and Shakti are two names of the same thing, of the same person, not even the same thing, the same person. The person he calls Kali, or that person, Vedantists, when they think of just one aspect of it, call Brahman. And then I didn't include this section here, but I'll read just to show how this also is the foundation of his universal teachings, right? His universal teachings. That's not what I mean. Although he does universal teachings, his teachings of radical religious pluralism. Let's say that, right? Right. It's like when he says the same person, only the names and forms are different. It is like Jal and Pani. Jal and Pani, right, are two different words for water. Jal is Jal is Hindi. Is it Swamiji, or Sanskrit? Jal is Sanskrit. Pani is in Hindi. And so at a pond, there are 3 or 4 ghats. These are steps that go down to a pond, right? At one ghat, Hindus drink water, they call it Jal. At another ghat, Muslims drink water and call it Pani. At another ghat, the English drink water, they call it water. These are 3 in 1. The difference is only in name. In another point, he even says some call it agua. This is because the Portuguese were in India, right? And Spanish had Portuguese, and Spanish Portuguese had come to India also, right? Right. But at another, these are 3 in 1. The differences is only in name. Some are calling her Allah, some call her God, some are calling her Brahman, some Kali, some are calling her Rama, Hari, Jesus, Durga. Right. This is a beautiful statement. So even these are 3. The difference is only in name. So he's even not only the different names of God are only the one thing, but even the different foundational differences, not just like sectarian differences, even foundational philosophical, ontological difference of Brahman and Shakti, Brahman and Maya, right? The personal and the impersonal, the transcendent and the immanent, right? God with form, God without form, God manifested, God unmanifested, the world or the void, right? These are aspects of the one thing, like sun and sunlight, like heat and fire. We can think of them as separate, and there's charm, even like to think of Rama and think of Jesus, there's charm in thinking of them as different. They're distinct, but it's like pulling water from one place and pulling the same water from another place. So anyways, let's go back to our verses. Let's see what we read today. Neither real nor unreal is this Maya, nor is it both, for that would be incongruous, lacking just characteristics. This indefinite entity has always subsisted. as heat inheres in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as cool light in the moon, just so this Maya inheres firmly in me. Into that Maya, the actions of souls, the souls themselves, and the ages eventually dissolve without distinction, as worldly concerns disappear in deep sleep. So, I lost again here. I thought I went back to the verse, but I didn't. But okay. So thank you for your kind attention. I beat my 8:30 by 4 minutes. So you have 4 minutes to ask all your complicated theological questions. Joy, Mom.
Elijah has a question.
Elijah.
I've been thinking a lot about Sri Ramakrishna during this conversation, and some of the quotes
Good.
you shared, but
My job is, because I guarantee thinking about him is better than thinking about me. That's good. Go ahead.
But I was thinking about this other quote of him, and I've been thinking a lot about I forget his name. He recently has become a lot more popular on the internet. He's a monk of or Swami of I think it's the Vedanta Society of Southern California, I believe. But anyways, I was thinking about this quote of Sri Ramakrishna that, like, when one is on the way to the roof, right? When one sees all the steps, they see the walls, they see everything, right? And they go up the stairs looking for the roof. And then when they reach the roof and they look back, they say, oh, everything else was made of brick as well, right? So like, you're traveling, whatever this means, towards the divine. And then once you reach whatever that is, you look back and you see, oh, everything is only that. There's no difference. I think this is where, like, this forget his name, but this idea of like Vijnana Vedanta has been like,
so you're referring to Ayan Maharaj, Swami Bhajanananda. His first book was under the title Ayan Maharaj, and his sannyas name is Swami Bhajanananda. It's true, he's now at the Vedanta Society here in Southern California, in Hollywood. And he has two very important books. I just give the plug for the books, although they're university press, so they're over $100 each usually. One is Infinite Paths, Infinite Realities, on the philosophical teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, and his newest book is Swami Vivekananda's
Vedantic cosmopolitanism.
Vedantic cosmopolitanism. Yeah, so both on the philosophical thoughts and of Swami Vivekananda. Both.
He has wonderful summaries on YouTube as well.
Yeah. So he's also a good speaker, and there's summaries you can download, the summaries of the first chapters of the books that gives you the gist of the arguments also, right? So he is Vijnana Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna used this term Vijnana, or he never used the term Vijnana Vedanta. That's something developed by Ayan Maharaj. Very, very helpful. But by Vijnana Sri Ramakrishna, Jnana is knowledge, Vijnana is intimate knowledge, right? Or fuller knowledge, or personal knowledge, right? And Vijnana is not a term invented by Sri Ramakrishna. It's there in the Gita, Jnana, Vijnana. And usually there refers like knowledge and realization, something like that. Can sometimes use that. Knowledge and wisdom, it can be, if you want to ferret those two out, right? But Sri Ramakrishna is using it very specifically to describe a higher. The problem was higher is we're using metaphors of up and down and space, and but a more complete, a more intimate, I think, is probably a better way of thinking of it. So he gave the example which Elijah is bringing of going to the rooftop. So in India, rooftops are big deals. We spend most of our life on the roof at our ashram in India. And the roof, there are these brick staircases that go up to the roof, right? And so and the roofs are flat. So generally, our fruits, like I fall off my roof very easily here. But so we have benches up there. We hang out on the roof, right? So if we tell somebody, "Oh, go to the roof," right? I'll meet you on the roof, or go to the roof. You get a beautiful view of the Kumbh Mela. And it's true. Our roof of our ashram, you see the whole Ganga bank where the Kumbh Mela is being held. Quite exciting. It's one of the reasons we hang out there, drink our tea up there, read up there, lay in the sun up there. It's a wonderful place, right? So to go there, what you have to do, you have to walk up the stairs, and every time you walk up the stairs, you have to leave. You have to renounce something. You have to renounce each step. In a certain sense, you have to say neti neti, not this, right? You have to think, what is the roof like? How do you know we haven't raved the roof? What does Swami say about going to the roof? Go to the roof. When you get to the top, so you know, okay, there's something that means there's nothing above it. The top, when you get to the top, so one quality of the roof is nothing above it. Okay, another quality, he said, from there you can see the view of the Kumbh Mela. So at this step, there's the next step that's above it. So that can't be the roof by the first criteria. And the second criteria, I don't see the Kumbh Mela. There's no view from here, right? So that's not it. So neti, next step. Is this it? No, not yet. It doesn't meet these two criteria, right? And eventually you get to the top. You got to the top. There's nothing above it. And wow, right? The beautiful view, the people, millions of people. It's quite exciting to see. That describes it. You go, you've got to the roof. You have the peak experience, right? You have the experience that's very distinct from not being on the roof. Being on the roof is totally different than not being on the roof. Being on the roof is less different, but also totally different than being on the steps on the way to the roof. The roof is its own distinct, singularly glorious, unique experience. But then what does one see? In our case, at our ashram, the roof, you see, what's the roof made out of? Let's look at the roof. The roof is made of brick and lime dust, brick dust, cement dust, lime paste, the things like, I don't know the things, how you make brick and cement and how you put it together, right? And then you can see on the way back, when you go back down, after enjoying the view, enjoying the air, the sun, and the experience, the vantage, right, the peak experience, you can come back down with a new satisfaction. And you realize, right, I went to the roof and I saw it was made of bricks. And now I see the staircase is also made of bricks, right? And at our ashram, even the ground floor is also covered in bricks, right? Everything's covered in bricks, right? Unless we touch earth or a plant or something, everything has to be covered in bricks, right? And then when we see, everything is made of the same thing as the roof, right? So you have a new experience, right? In a certain sense, you have deeper realization, you have a new experience, a new appreciation of the roof, of the steps, right? Everything is made of the same thing as a roof. But it doesn't mean that the experience will be the same at the top of the roof and on the staircase. So there is a danger, and I've mentioned this before, and I recently mentioned it at the retreat in San Diego. This became a topic of all the speakers' discussion, that there is a danger in pretending you're on the roof, right? If you say, the roof is made of, the scripture says, the roof is made of brick, right? And cement and lime paste. And then I look here at the first step, look, brick, lime paste, cement. I'm on the roof. Everything is one. The roof, the God has become everything, or the roof is the same as the stairs, right? And so that's true. You're making a true statement, right? You maybe even repeating the profound realization of somebody who's gone up and down, who's been to the top of the roof and come back down and told you that, right? But it's not your experience yet, and you haven't got the vantage yet, right? So you haven't got the experience. So the idea of taking the world as non-different from Brahman, in a certain sense, prematurely, right? It is non-different from Brahman, right? Like sunlight is not different from the sun, like heat is not different from fire, right? But it's not our full realization yet. You're after realization. Once you've experienced Brahman, once you've experienced God, one then realizes, one then says, Ramakrishna says, the world, the Lord, the Divine Mother has become all this. First one thinks by inquiry, by between what is, like, what's like when you say this is not the roof, this is not the roof, this is not the roof, because there's something above it, using the two criteria, nothing above it and a good vista. To think, this is not Brahman because it's not permanent, it's not subtle, it's not the cause, it's not it's changing, It's, you know, all it's a subject, not, it's the object, not a subject. You keep whatever method you're using for analysis, right? This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. It doesn't mean you have to start, oh, this world is false, or this world is fake, or this world is evil, right? But we're not looking, we're looking for the roof, right? And from that, we'll have new appreciation of all aspects of the world. So when Sri Ramakrishna said Kali and Brahman are identical, or this God has become the world, it's different than when we say it, right? And even if when we're repeating him, it's not our experience yet. We still have to get the experience, you know. And that the Devi's going to. So right now she's describing ontology, right? Now she's going to describe how to have the experience of her, how to know Brahman, how to know our essential nature as non-different from Brahman, right? To get the peak experience. Then we could dance and sing in rapturous knowledge that this world is nothing but her, that she's become everything, right? And we should know that going in also, right? So it's not like there's one scene, very important chapter right there in the Katamrita. In the same conversation, Sri Ramakrishna a couple times says to a group of people, God is real, the world is unreal, right? He says it 2-3 times, right, to a group of people, right? And then I think it was M, I'm not sure if it was M or somebody else asked, says, sir, is the world really unreal? Do we have to think that? Oh, why unreal? This world is nothing but manifestation of Brahman, or the Divine Mother, right? Right, it's the same conversation, right? So you actually realize that his first thing by saying that to think the world is unreal and God alone is real, that is the eternal reality, unchanging reality, is to spur us to search for the real. Once we see the real, then we can see it. And once we see the real, I always say you can't unsee it, right? Once you know what you're looking for, you'll see it everywhere, right? Once we experience it, then we'll have a new experience. But he softened it. He says, no, don't think it's not actually unreal. It's the Divine Mother. But you still have to know, you still have to get the experience by realizing that it's still it's temporary, not permanent. We have to find the permanent. And then we can see how the permanent and the impermanent are both part of the same, Sri Ramakrishna said, are part of the same fruit. To get the full weight of the fruit, you have to have the full thing. So anyway, this is, I restated your example, but it's a very good, when I think of these points, I think of like 6 main examples of Sri Ramakrishna I keep going back to. This is one of them. That's so foundational. The roof and steps example is very important. So it's good. I'm glad you mentioned it. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. Anything else? Boom, boom, boom.
Does little Vijay have a question?
I mean, he has a lot to say, but I don't know that any of it is sensical.
Oh, Kyla. Oh, I see. He's speaking. Kai's speaking. There. Well, actually, he's just waiting to correct all of us. I'm sure, because he's recently been to the roof. And he's come back down, but the problem sometimes we come back down and forget a little bit. So we bump our head on the way back down to our next birth and we forget a lot. But like sometimes you can look in their eyes and you see what they've seen something recently and they still kind of remember it. It's good that in such a family that's encouraging its remembrance, but you could almost see, I mean, I've seen it in children and that you can see when of course it's a developmental stage, it's probably God's will also, but that you see it fade from their memory as this new world of name and form takes center stage, right? And we have to remember again. Wonderful to see. He's getting big. How old is he now?
He just turned 7 months.
Wow.
But he's the size of an 18-month-old. He's huge. Yeah, Mom. Time well. Are we going to get to see him on Sunday? Well, no, on the 28th.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
All
good.
willing, we will be there. Yes.
Excellent, excellent.
You have to come home to bring
Yes.
him.
Yes, we do, and yes, we will.
Wonderful, wonderful.
The kids want to see him.
Oh, he'll have so much fun with them. Yeah.
You can hand them over to the girls.
I will.
Well, before we're closing up, any other points? Or I think maybe everybody's been fully convinced of my excellent arguments. But actually, you can see these beautiful verses. Each verse just unpacks another little aspect, describing a way of understanding, right? And it mentioned, as also the that Mackenzie Brown also mentions that the mixing of Advaita and Shaktism, right, is, so sometimes it's a little confusing. But if we look at the chapter as a whole, and it's going to describe really the evolution of a world, right, from out of primordial Shakti, right? So it's ultimately, I think, describing the winning argument for the text, whether or not you accept this argument, right? It's going to be a Shaktism, right? But we mentioned also before that it's the importance of Advaita and Advaita Vedanta during the time when this text was composed, right? It had to be dealt with, and you had to use that language, even when trying to put forth a more Shakta teaching, right? The language of Advaita, the argument of Advaita still had to be given the Upanishads and the Advaitic system, right? So it's to our benefit, because we get to realize that there's more than one way, right? Of course, we know there's more than one way to interpret Upanishads, right? Right. But there's also more than one way even to interpret Advaita, which I think is also important, right? So I think this is a holistic and inclusivistic, if that's a word, view of the one, right? And even when you end up with a many, which is the topic of discussion, when there's only one, how do you get many, right? So even even in the light of the many, the one is not lost, and the organic vision of that, of the one and the many, seeing the whole, getting the full fruit, is important, right? But there's also great benefit of experiencing the one as it is, right? That they're reaching the roof, and that's what the Devi herself will describe. But as the verses go on, the next chapter, especially chapters on yoga, especially, right? Yeah. So it's very. I find these verses very exciting.
Ron Molly, you have a question?
Swamiji, it's a question. We can answer it next time. But the question was when Michael asked this question about Jiva, then we had the discussion about profound, like the deep sleep state, and then Maya, all of this. How does all of this correspond to the Taittiriya Upanishad and the Panchamahakosha?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the five, she's referring to the five sheaths, right? That are given in the Upanishad. We've discussed them quite elaborately from kind of a yogic perspective, right? Of seeing like the outer, we have the Annamaya, our physical body made of food, and we have the mental body, pranic body, wisdom body, bliss body, and then you have the Atman. And often we think of the Atman within, the Jīvānāṃ within, right? And all these coverings, right? So deep within, we find our real you, or our real individual. And we use that language, even deep within us, we find, I remember in our high school student underground newspaper, poetry paper, there's one poem in there. I think I still remember. I think Ambikananda had some poems in that episode. I don't think this was yours, but it's like, claw your way through until you find the real you. I still remember. How many years ago was that? Right, junior year in high school, I think. Claw your way through till you find the real. Within you is your real individuality is there. If you within all that, but in the Upanishads, I believe, I have to refresh myself a little bit. It's not fresh in my mind, but in the Upanishad, it's not exactly that, right? These are sheaths that cover. Swami Yatishwarananda, a great vice president of the Ramakrishna order, in a book called Meditation and Spiritual Life, right? Meditation and Spiritual. It's heavily Vedantic, but it's the masterpiece book on sadhana in the Ramakrishna tradition. It's definitely leans towards Advaita Vedantic practice, but it's the masterpiece book. If you want a book on a clear-minded book on sadhana, right, from the Ramakrishna tradition, this is a beautiful book called Meditation and Spiritual Life by Swami Yatishwarananda. But in this chapter, he talks about the pancha mahakoshas, right? He describes we have to reverse the image, right? So we think of we're an individual covered by all these sheaths, right? He says, but actually there is the infinite, and within the infinite there's a bunch of sheaths, right? Seeming to so we have to separate it. Actually, the thing we think's inside is the one that's infinite outside. So we think we're an individual covered by all these sheaths, but that's not. We're actually infinite, seemingly separated into an individual, right? That's one way, a proto-Vedantic seed in the Upanishad of describing how the sense of individual, a possibly way of understanding how the sense of individuality, right, is how we get a sense of individuality when there's actually only the self, right? You meant infinite, so it's like a piece of paper with a bunch of rings on it. We're not within the rings. We're the paper, right? We're the substratum in which we can reverse it. So Anandamaya Kosha is not the inner ring, it's the outer ring, right? The closest to the infinite, not the closest to our inner self, right? But as the inner self, it still works. The koshas, we think of it that way, and I think it's still yogically we think of it that way with the antarkarana and the shukshma sharira and karana sharira. We think of the subtle body to be the mind and the prana, and the physical body to be, we think connected that way, and it works well enough, right? But I think in the Upanishads, it's referring how we seem to be an individual when actually there's only one, right? I believe. But then it's not super fresh in my mind. Yeah.
There's one, I don't know, I could read, there's one little, like half a paragraph. Yeah. Actually, Michael, when you were asking about the jiva, it reminded me of that. I was trying to find it. This is in M. Hirayana's Outlines of Indian Philosophy. And I just remember this question because that idea about jiva, and actually then there's a footnote where he talks about the sheaths. So, okay. But he says, the word jiva is derived from the root jiv, which means to continue breathing. The name gives prominence to one of the two aspects of life's activity, specifically the biological or unconscious, such as breathing, which goes on even when the mind is quiescent, as in deep sleep. The Upanishads use two other terms for the soul, specifically bhokta, the experience, and karta, the agent, which together emphasize the other, specifically the psychological or conscious aspect of the activity. The principle of unconscious activity is termed prana, and the term conscious activity manas. Every soul is conditioned by these two principles throughout its empirical existence. To these comparatively permanent adjuncts of it should be added the material body, which alone is replaced at every birth. These three together, the body, prana, and manas. And then he has a footnote, which ties into Ranmali, your question. If we reckon manas as threefold with its conscious, self-conscious, and self-transcendent phases, we have here the 5 sheaths of the doctrine of the koshas. So he says, these three together, the body, prana, and manas, form a sort of empirical home for the soul. So I thought that was interesting.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's so good. Like it has the prana, manas, and buddhi, right, of the active kind of sphere. And then you go into, I guess, when you're working towards the ultimate Anandamai kosha, I guess, then it becomes that blissful state where we are not involved so much in prana, manas, and buddhi, right?
And so a way of saying that a little psychologically is that we're not identified with the body and the mind, right? You know, and if we're not identified with our body and mind and ego, right, then what are we? You know, are we an individual? These are the things that define our individuality, right? But some would hold, right? So then that if we're not identified with our body, our mind, and intellect, the different the koshas, right? Then we're identified with the one that not an individual. So that's where you get where it gets dangerously close to Advaita. You know, be careful. You may just fall over the edge here, right? So, come on in, the water's fine. Jayamo. Super interesting, super excellent. So it is now almost 9, a few minutes till 9. So thank you for your kind attention. And tomorrow, just a program note, tomorrow is Phalahadini Kali Puja, it's Amavasya. And this is a very important Amavasya, a very important Kali Puja. Phalahadini is she who takes fruit. Phalahari, many yogis are called Phalahari yogis. These are yogis that only eat fruitarians, right? So the Devi eats fruit on this day, right? And so there's a beautiful Leela. I'll end this with a story time a little bit, right? We have to remember the names. This is in some versions of the Krishna Leela, where Radha's sister-in-law, I'm forgetting her name, Of course, we always think of Radha and Krishna. We don't think of Radha's husband. Anybody remember Radha's husband's name? Who remembers Radha's husband's name? I forget I'm forgetting, maybe I remember it. Anyway, Radha's sister-in-law suspected that Radha was meeting Krishna, right? She was a jealous and suspecting sister-in-law, right? And so she found Radha and Krishna in loving exchanges with the gopis in the forest, and he ran to go tell her brother, right? And come quick. And so Radha's husband, when he went and they saw Radha, just before he got there, Krishna told Radha and the gopis, quick, go into the forest and collect flowers and fruit, right? And they went and they collected flowers and fruit, and then they offered it to him, and he took on the form of Kali, right? He was sword and everything, and they're offering, and Radha's husband saw and goes, oh, how wonderful, because actually we some things we know, as per tradition, Radha's Kuladevata, Radha's family deity was Narasingha, right? And Radha's husband's deity was Kali. His family was Kali Bhakta. So he saw, what's wrong? Oh, wonderful, Radha and the gopis, my wife and the gopis are worshiping our family deity in the forest. How wonderful, right? So he got away from getting in trouble. She got away from getting in trouble. So that's supposed to have happened on this moonless night, right? When Krishna became Kali and took fruit. And of course, this is also a play. Kali is not a fruit-eating deity. She's a blood-drinking deity in the ancient world, right? A different type of deity, right? And so this is a very sweet form, taking that Kali and Krishna are one in this scene, right? And Phalahadini also means the one who takes the fruit of actions, not just apples and pears and grapes and things like this, right? And berries, right? Takes the fruits of our action. So in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, this is a very important, one of the most important episodes in Sri Ramakrishna's Leela, where he, at the end of his sadhana period, right, it came Amavasya night, and he wanted to do a Kali Puja on this night, midnight puja, and but he didn't want to do it in the temple. He said, my other priests will do puja in the temple. He wanted to do a puja in his room. So his nephew arranged everything, all the paraphernalia. And usually what you do, you'd get a water pot and you invoke the goddess in a kalasha and a ghat and do the Kali Puja, Phalahadini Kali Puja. but he told go get my wife. He wanted his Sharada Devi to be present during the ceremony. And there was an asana, a wooden plank that was put for the placement of the deity. And when she came in, he pointed to the plank and says, "You sit there." And just in her kind of in a semi-conscious state, she sat down in the place of the deity and went into, and as he come, Gustabhyanam, he did all the nyasa, bhuta shuti, sprinkling, holy waters, everything like that. She went deeper and deeper in meditation. And at the end of which he did the prana pratistana to her, to Holy Mother. And with the mantra, Hey Tripura Sundari. He invoked Lalita Tripura Sundari, the most beautiful of the three worlds, right? So we know that the people present said, this is the one verse he says, Hey Tripura Sundari, oh Tripura Sundari. And he did the installation and he worshipped her. She was in the state of samadhi during the puja. Then he took his own mala, his japa mala, representing, of course, all of his sadhanas, and offer them to her at her feet. This is offering the results of all of his sadhanas to her. This is phalahadini, the fruit of his sadhanas, the results of his sadhana he gave to her, right? And as well as gave her the mala. She had that mala her whole life. She gave it to one of her disciples at the end of her life, to Durga Ma, end of her life. So this represents, and so it said that it awakened. Even Holy Mother said he awakened the Divine Mother in me, right? Something within her was blossomed. Of course, she was always the Divine Mother, but some real aspect of the Divine Mother awakened in her. And also in Sri Vidya Tantra, there is a tradition of worshiping the wife at the end of a puja. It's called Suvasini Puja. So one way of interpreting this scene is his Suvasini Puja, right? At the end, and it's still done. I've seen it done many times during elaborate Sri Yantra Puja, Sri Chakra Puja. There is first the worship of the wife, and then worship of a senior woman, the oldest woman in the crowd, in the crowd, right? So this could be seen that way. Also, however we understand it, Giri has done his master thesis on this, a brilliant master thesis on this scene, so he would know more about it. I mean, he knows differently about it. He thought about it differently. But this is the day. This is the anniversary of that day when Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Holy Mother, worshipped the Divine Mother as in Holy Mother, or Holy Mother as the Divine Mother, right? And maybe we believe awakened something in her, right? So it's very significant day. We often celebrate this as kind of our anniversary. We often it's not the actual day the Ma's installation was done, but it's within a few weeks of that. So we sometimes do it on this day because we're celebrating our 30th anniversary during Memorial Day weekend, where we switched the pujas for the anniversary to that weekend. But tomorrow is a very auspicious day. We'll be broadcasting. If you want to watch the puja, there'll be a little bit more elaborate puja and homa. So wherever you are, if you can't join us, you can't watch, right? It's a good day, good night to offer the fruits of your actions to the Divine Mother. And also, if you want to decorate, you can offer Ma fruit, especially. This is a mother who takes fruit. So literally fruit, as well as figuratively, the fruits, right? The results, right, of everything. And we offer all the fruits of, ultimately, we should be offering the fruits of all our actions to the God. This is a good day to remember that. So that was a good, so that's tomorrow. And on the Memorial Day weekend, we have our celebration. And so many auspicious days, auspicious time coming. I got good. Okay, Jai Ma. Good night. Switch to galleries. I can see who's here. Jai Ma, Ranmali, Gavin, Sundari.
Jai Ma Swamiji.
Jai Ma. And all right. Jai Ma. And it's here. Good.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. Good night.